The searing California sun did little to warm the cold dread coiling in 16-year-old Arissa's stomach. The officer's face, a mask of contemptuous fury, was inches from hers. His name tag read Miller. His breath was hot, laced with stale coffee and an unnerving scent of authority gone sour. "You think you're special, huh? A little princess in your designer jeans? Think the rules don't apply to you?" His grip on her arm was a band of steel, fingers digging into her bicep with bruising force. She had done nothing. She and her friend Maya were just leaving the Calabasas Commons after grabbing a smoothie. A simple, joyful teenage afternoon, now shattered. The altercation started over a misunderstanding, a dropped wallet that Miller mistook for a drug deal, but his reaction was a wildfire of rage, disproportionate and terrifying. Before Arissa could fully process his accusation, he slammed her against the stucco wall of a Sephora. The impact knocked the wind out of her, her head cracking against the abrasive surface. Stars exploded behind her eyes. Maya screamed. Miller's voice was a low growl, a predator's rumble. "Resisting arrest, huh? We'll see about that." He yanked her arm, preparing to cuff her. In that moment of pain and terror, a flicker of instinct, honed over years of disciplined training in a quiet dojo with her father, kicked in. It wasn't aggression, it was preservation. She shifted her weight, using his momentum against him to create a sliver of space. A basic Aikido principle. It was just enough to regain her footing. But to Miller, it was the ultimate act of defiance. The back of his hand connected with her cheek with a sound like a pistol shot. The world tilted, a smear of shocked faces and distant sounds. As she crumpled to the pavement, the last thing she heard before the darkness swirled was Miller's triumphant, cruel laugh. He had no idea he had just assaulted a girl who wasn't just any teenager. He had just declared war on a force of nature, a man whose entire on-screen persona was built on avenging the wronged. He had just attacked the daughter of Steven Seagal. The precinct booking room was a sterile, soul-crushing limbo. The fluorescent lights hummed a monotonous dirge. Arissa sat on a cold metal bench, a throbbing ache radiating from her cheekbone, which was already swelling into a grotesque purple bloom. Her pristine white t-shirt was smudged with dirt and a small streak of blood from a cut on her lip. They had taken her phone, her rights read to her in a bored monotone. She was processed not as a victim, but as a juvenile delinquent, charges resisting arrest and assaulting an officer. It was a fiction so blatant, so perverse, it felt like a waking nightmare. Officer Miller swaggered past the holding cell, a smirk playing on his lips. He caught her eye and gave a slow, deliberate wink. It was a gesture of absolute power, a declaration that his word, his reality, was the only one that mattered. His partner, a younger officer named Evans, looked uneasy. Evans had witnessed the whole thing. He'd seen the dropped wallet, heard Arissa's polite attempts to explain. He saw Miller's explosion, the unprovoked violence. But Miller was a 15-year veteran, a precinct king with a reputation for getting things done. Evans was a rookie, still on probation. To speak up was to commit career suicide. He stayed silent, the silence a heavy stone in his gut. Maya's parents had arrived, frantic and furious, but were met with a blue wall of bureaucratic indifference. They were told their lawyer could see Arissa in the morning. "And her father?" Maya's mother demanded. "Have you called her father?" The desk sergeant sighed, annoyed. "We have the number on file. He'll be notified." He didn't recognize the name on the intake form, Steven F. Seagal. To him, it was just another name in a long, thankless night. Miles away, in a secluded ranch nestled in the Montana mountains, Steven Seagal was meditating. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and violet. His home was a sanctuary of peace, a world away from the violence he portrayed in films. His phone, usually on silent, was programmed to ring with a specific, urgent tone for calls concerning his children. The ring shattered the tranquility. He answered, his voice calm. "Hello?" It was a frantic Maya on the line, using her own phone now that she was released to her parents. Her words tumbled out, a torrent of tears and panicked explanations. "Slammed her against the wall. He hit her, Mr. Seagal. He hit her so hard. They arrested her." The calm in Steven's demeanor didn't break. It transformed. It wasn't the explosive anger of a movie hero. It was something far more terrifying. The absolute chilling focus of a predator. The air around him seemed to drop a few degrees. His eyes, often seen as placid, hardened into chips of obsidian. "Where is she, Maya?" His voice was unnaturally level, devoid of emotion, which made it all the more menacing. "Calabasas, LAPD Valley Division." "I'm on my way," he said, and the line went dead. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply stated a fact, as one might state that the sun will rise. But in that statement lay an unspoken promise of reckoning. He moved with a speed and purpose that belied his age. A call to his pilot had his private jet being fueled. Another call went to his personal lawyer, Julian Croft, a man known in legal circles as the Shark, for his ability to smell blood in the water from miles away. "Julian," Seagal's voice was gravel. "My daughter. She's been assaulted by a police officer. I want his name, his history, everything. I want the department's record on excessive force. I want satellite photos of the parking lot if you can get them. Spare no expense. I'll be in LA in 3 hours." The storm was no longer gathering. It had a name, and it was heading for Los Angeles. By the time Seagal's black Cadillac Escalade, flanked by another carrying his security and legal team, pulled up to the Valley Division station, it was 2 a.m. He stepped out of the vehicle, not in the silk kimonos of his films, but in simple black jeans, a black shirt, and a leather jacket. He didn't need a costume. His presence was enough. At 6'4", he was an imposing figure, and he moved with the silent, deliberate grace of a martial artist. The energy around him was palpable, a low-frequency hum of controlled fury. He walked into the precinct, and the atmosphere changed instantly. The board desk sergeant looked up, his jaw slackening as he recognized the face from countless movie posters. Whispers spread like fire through the late-night shift. This wasn't some B-list celebrity's kid in trouble. This was different. "I am here for my daughter, Arissa Seagal," Seagal stated, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of an anvil. Julian Croft, impeccably dressed and radiating ruthless competence, stepped forward. "Julian Croft, counsel for Mr. Seagal and his daughter. We demand her immediate release. She was assaulted, and we have a witness. Any attempt to hold her further will be met with a lawsuit that will personally name every officer involved, including the chief of police." The sergeant, flustered, stammered, and picked up the phone to call his watch commander. Meanwhile, Officer Miller was at the end of his shift, boasting to a few colleagues about putting some rich brat in her place. He was laughing when the watch commander, a portly man with a perpetually worried expression, burst into the locker room. "Miller! My office! Now! What the hell did you do?" Miller's bravado faltered. "What are you talking about? I made a legitimate bust." "A legitimate bust? Steven Seagal is in the lobby with Julian Croft. The Julian Croft! They're saying you assaulted his daughter, his 16-year-old daughter." The color drained from Miller's face. Seagal. He'd heard whispers about the actor being a real-deal martial artist, an honorary deputy in other states. But he was just an actor, wasn't he? Suddenly, the memory of the girl's strange, effortless shift in balance didn't seem like defiance. It seemed like training. She resisted," Miller stammered, his confidence evaporating. "She assaulted me." "Did she?" The commander shot back. "Because her friend's story is very different, and Croft is already talking about pulling surveillance footage from every store in the Commons. The blue wall, That unspoken code of solidarity among officers was already beginning to show cracks. Fear is a powerful solvent. The fear of a lawsuit that could bankrupt them, of a media scandal that could end careers, was now greater than their loyalty to a hot-headed bully like Miller. Arisa was released within the hour. The moment she saw her father, the facade of bravery she had maintained crumbled. She ran into his arms, sobbing, the pain and humiliation washing over her. Seagal held her, his large frame a shield around her. He looked at the ugly bruise on her face, the cut on her lip. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. His eyes, burning with a cold, righteous fire, said it all. He looked over her head at the watch commander, a silent promise hanging in the air. This is not over. This has just begun. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in the application of power. While Seagal focused on his daughter, getting her medical attention, ensuring she felt safe, listening to her story over and over with unwavering patience, his machine went to work. Julian Croft filed a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against the LAPD, the city, and Officer David Miller personally. He didn't just file it. He held a press conference. The story exploded. Cop's brutal attack on child backfires. She's Steven Seagal's daughter, screamed the headlines. Every news outlet from TMZ to CNN picked it up. The narrative was irresistible. A violent cop, a symbol of systemic abuse, versus a beloved action hero fighting for his own child. Croft's team of private investigators, ex-Mossad and former FBI agents, descended on Miller's life like locusts. They were ruthlessly efficient. They uncovered a pattern. Miller had 12 excessive force complaints in his file, all of them dismissed after internal investigation. They found witnesses from past incidents, people who had been too afraid to speak up, who were now emboldened by the high-profile case. They found whispers of steroid use, of a messy divorce, of a man simmering with resentment towards a world he felt had slighted him. The most crucial piece of evidence, however, came from an unexpected source. A film student from USC had been in the Commons, testing out a new lens on his camera. He had seen the altercation begin and, sensing trouble, had started recording. The video was crystal clear. It showed Arisa and Maya laughing. It showed the dropped wallet. It showed Miller's aggressive approach. It captured his snarling words, Arisa's calm attempts to de-escalate, and then the unprovoked, shocking violence. It showed him slamming her against the wall. It showed her instinctive defensive shift. And it showed, in horrifying high definition, the full, vicious swing of his hand striking her face. There was no ambiguity. It was a brutal assault on a minor. The student, initially terrified of police retaliation, saw the news reports and contacted Julian Croft's office. The video was the nail in Miller's coffin. Inside the LAPD, panic set in. The chief of police, a political appointee named Michaels, tried to control the narrative. He issued a statement about a thorough investigation and the importance of not rushing to judgment. He put Miller on paid administrative leave, a standard defensive move. It wasn't enough. Seagal wasn't interested in a settlement or a quiet apology. He wanted accountability. He wanted a systemic change. This wasn't about money. It was about the principle that a badge is not a license to bully and brutalize. He agreed to one single television interview. He sat opposite a respected journalist, calm and composed. He didn't rage. He spoke with quiet intensity. "This isn't about me being a movie star," he said, his voice resonating with sincerity. "This is about a man with a badge and a gun who felt he had the right to beat a child, my child. But I ask myself, what if she wasn't my daughter? What if her father wasn't able to hire the best lawyers? What if there wasn't a camera? This happens every day. This man, this Officer Miller, is not a bad apple. He is the symptom of a poisoned tree. The system that protects men like him, that dismisses complaints, that builds a blue wall of silence, that is what we must fight. My fight for Arisa is now a fight for every person who has been a victim of this kind of abuse." His words resonated across the country. He had masterfully reframed the narrative. It was no longer just a celebrity drama, it was a crusade for justice. The pressure on Chief Michaels became unbearable. The mayor was calling him every hour. Protest groups were organizing rallies outside the Valley Division precinct. The police union, which had initially made aggressive statements defending Miller, grew silent once the video was leaked to the press by Croft's team. The footage was undeniable, sickening. A meeting was arranged, Chief Michaels, the city attorney, Julian Croft, and Steven Seagal. Miller was not invited. They met in a sterile conference room at City Hall. Michaels began with a conciliatory tone, offering a profound apology and talking about departmental reforms. Seagal let him finish. Then he leaned forward slightly, his presence dominating the room. "Apologies are words, Chief," Seagal said, his voice a low rumble. "I'm interested in actions. Officer Miller will be fired. His certification to serve as a police officer in the state of California will be permanently revoked. The district attorney will press felony assault charges against him. The 2 other officers who stood by and did nothing will be suspended without pay and retrained from the ground up. You will issue a public apology not just to my daughter, but to the 12 other victims of Miller whose cases your department buried. And you will implement a new, independent civilian oversight committee with real power. These are not requests." The city attorney started to bluster about procedures and union contracts. Julian Croft slid a file across the table. "That's the preliminary discovery for our civil suit. We have sworn affidavits from 7 of Miller's other victims. We have a forensic accountant's report on his finances. We have 2 fellow officers willing to testify, anonymously for now, about his history of violence and the cover-ups. And, of course, we have the video. We can settle this my client's way, or we can spend the next 5 years in court, costing this city $100 million and exposing every dirty secret in your department. Your choice." It was a checkmate. The power had shifted completely. The institutional authority of the LAPD had crumbled against the focused, relentless pressure of one determined man. Chief Michaels looked at Seagal, whose face was unreadable, a mask of stone. He saw no room for negotiation. He saw only the consequence of a terrible mistake made by one of his officers. "You'll have his badge by the end of the day," Michaels conceded, his voice heavy with defeat. David Miller was at home when the call came. He was fired. The DA's office was filing charges. He was a pariah. His so-called brothers in blue wouldn't even take his calls. In the span of 72 hours, his world had been dismantled, his identity stripped away. The arrogance that had been his armor for 15 years was gone, replaced by a gnawing, pathetic fear. He was no longer the hunter. He was the prey. He thought of the girl's face, the brief, almost imperceptible shift of her body. He had mistaken training for defiance, discipline for disrespect. He had picked on a lamb, not knowing she was guarded by a lion. Weeks later, Arissa stood with her father in their quiet dojo back in Montana. The physical bruises had faded, but the emotional scars remained. She was more reserved, the carefree light in her eyes dimmed by a new, harsh understanding of the world. "I did what you taught me, Dad," she said quietly, tying the belt of her GI. "Aikido is about harmony, not conflict. I tried to de-escalate. I used his momentum. It wasn't enough." Seagal placed a large, gentle hand on her shoulder. "It was more than enough," he said, his voice thick with pride. "You were brave. You were disciplined. What that man did was not a reflection of you. It was a reflection of the darkness in him. True power, Arissa, is not about breaking people. It's about having the strength to control yourself, to protect others, and to ensure that justice prevails. You did not start the fight, but we finished it." He looked at his daughter, seeing not a victim, but a survivor. The incident had changed her, but it had not broken her. It had forged a new kind of strength in her, a resilience born from trauma but tempered by justice. The legal battles would continue for months, but the war was won. The story of Officer Miller's downfall became a cautionary tale in precincts across the country. It was an echo, a reminder that in a world of cameras and consequences, the old walls of silence could be torn down, and that sometimes the most dangerous person to bully is the quiet girl who happens to be a lion's daughter. Justice, like the principles of Aikido, was about restoring balance, and for one brutal cop, the balance had been restored with devastating, life-altering force.